The observation deck of the Daleth Ascendant hummed with the low frequency of 100 concerned voices. Through the reinforced viewport, the barren moon of Kethris 7 stretched endlessly, its crimson surface cracked like dried blood. Somewhere down there, in a research outpost that had gone dark 3 cycles ago, the rescue team had found something impossible. They had found Lyra Quill alive. More impossibly, they had found her surrounded by 17 Vakrion cubs, the most dangerous juvenile predators in the known galaxy. All of them docile, well-fed, and unwilling to leave her side. Commander Thesson, a towering Vakrion with midnight blue fur and scars that told stories of 100 hunts, stood before the containment bay's entrance. His secondary arms were crossed tightly over his chest, a gesture his species reserved for profound unease. Behind the reinforced glass, the human sat cross-legged on the floor, her brown hair matted with dirt and dried blood, her coveralls torn and patched with strips of insulation foam. Around her, the cubs wrestled and played, occasionally returning to nuzzle against her sides. "This defies every instinct," Thesson growled to his second-in-command. "Vakrion young are born with the killing reflex. They should have torn her apart the moment they caught her scent." "Perhaps she drugged them?" his officer suggested weakly. "The scans show no chemical agents, no pheromone manipulation, nothing." The commander's claws flexed involuntarily. "Only her." Inside the containment bay, Lyra Quill looked up as the door hissed open. She didn't stand. She was too weak for that. Her body clearly pushed past the limits of human endurance, but her eyes, brown and somehow still bright, tracked the massive Vakrion warrior as he entered alone. "Commander," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'd stand, but I don't think my legs would cooperate." Thesson approached slowly, watching as several cubs moved to place themselves between him and the human. Protective. The absurdity of it made his fur bristle. "Explain yourself, human." The outpost was overrun 37 planetary rotations ago. The adult Vakrions, our own people, gone feral from the radiation leak, they massacred your entire research team. Yet, here you sit, alive, surrounded by their offspring. Lyra's hand moved to stroke the head of a cub that had pressed against her leg. The creature, which would grow to become a 300-pound apex predator, purred under her touch. "The adults were too far gone," she said quietly. "The radiation poisoning turned them savage. But the cubs..." She glanced down at the young Vakrion, nuzzling her palm. "They were just scared. Hungry. Lost. So you fed them." Thesson's statement wasn't a question. "Of course I fed them. With what?" "The outpost stores were depleted. The supply drops couldn't land safely. We detected no indigenous food sources." The commander's eyes narrowed. "What did you feed them?" "Lyra Quill." The human was silent for a long moment. When she finally looked up, Thesson saw something in her expression that made his warrior's heart, a heart that had known countless battles, skip a beat. "My rations," she said simply. "And when those ran out, whatever I could find. Fungal growths from the water recyclers. Protein paste I synthesized from my own medical supplies. I got creative." "Impossible. The cubs require fresh protein, meat. A Vakrion youngling consumes nearly twice its body weight in." Thesson stopped. His nostrils flared as a horrifying realization crept over him. "Show me your arms." Lyra hesitated, then slowly pushed up her tattered sleeves. The commander's breath caught in his throat. Her arms were a roadmap of healed cuts, carefully placed scars that ran in neat lines along her forearms and biceps. Precise, methodical, not the random wounds of combat, but the deliberate marks of someone who had bled herself, controlled portions at a time, to feed creatures that would have killed her without hesitation. "You fed them your own blood," Thesson whispered, the words barely escaping his throat. "They were babies," Lyra said, as if this explained everything. "They didn't ask to be born into a nightmare. Their parents were dead or dying. Someone had to." She trailed off, exhausted. "Someone had to care." One of the cubs, larger than the others, with the distinctive silver-tipped ears of a pack alpha, padded over to Thesson. The young Vakrian sat before the commander, then did something that made every warrior on the observation deck go silent. He bowed his head. Tovik, as Lyra had named him, pressed his muzzle to the floor in a gesture of submission and honor that juvenile Vakrians showed only to their pack's matriarch. The ultimate acknowledgement of authority, of sacrifice, of leadership earned through selfless action. Impossible, Thesson breathed. He recognizes you as Alpha. I just fed them before I ate, Lyra said, confusion crossing her face. That's what you do, right? You take care of the young first. It's basic. It's just basic decency. The commander stared at this fragile human, this creature from a species the Galactic Council had only recently granted provisional membership, this being so physically weak compared to nearly every other spacefaring race, and felt something shift in his understanding of strength. In Vakrian culture, he said slowly, the Alpha eats first. Always. It is the privilege of rank, the right of the strong. A leader who starves while others feast is considered. He searched for the word. Broken. Weak. A failure. Lyra's laugh was bitter and tired. Then maybe your culture needs some human perspective. Thesson was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself to one knee. Around him, the cubs gathered closer, as if bearing witness. Lyra Quill of Earth, he said, his voice carrying the weight of ritual. You have honored our young with your sacrifice. You have shown them the meaning of true strength, not the strength to take, but the strength to give, when you have nothing left to give. He placed his primary hand over his heart's. You have taught an old warrior that perhaps humans understand something about pack that we Vakrians have forgotten. Through the observation window, dozens of Vakrian soldiers watched as their commander, the most decorated warrior in the fleet, bowed his head to a human who could barely stand. When the rescue team finally carried Lyra Quill to medical bay, 17 cubs followed in solemn procession. Tovik walked at the front, his silver-tipped ears held high, his young eyes already carrying the wisdom of a future Alpha who had learned his first and most important lesson. True leaders eat last. And sometimes, the greatest warriors are those who never lift a weapon at all.